Hello and welcome to the Tail Spinner podcast. This is Mark Reinhagen, and you hopefully know who I am. If not, look me up on Wikipedia. My kids love saying that. Just look up her dad on Wikipedia. Yeah, weird. Anyway, I have with me Alicia Lee, who
Hey.
is our bringer of darkness, and Joe Weinberg. And today we're discussing basically our new game, our new world, our new setting, which is going to be Beastknight. And we're doing basically, we've already got Fang Night done. We've got Badlander nearly done, and Beastknight will be our third. We're doing 3 games in 6 months, which should be impossible, but we're going to do it. 1, 2, 3 on Kickstarter. And what's wild is that we haven't even figured out everything on Beastknight, and so we're just going to do the rest of it today. And if you're not into anything other than world building and creative stuff like that, don't worry, we're not discussing rules. This is just world stuff, right? So I don't know,
So this
guys.
would be applicable if you're writing novels, running games, telling stories, anything.
Yeah. This is world building 101, character building 101. This is sort of the core of what you do in a role playing game. I've always said that like right now we live in a time where comic books went from stupid kid stuff basically, right? And now most valuable IPs have come out of comic books, right? Like Marvel is more valuable than Star Wars. Who would think that? And it came out of what was seen until just in the last decade or two as horrible pulp fiction. Like just the lowest of the low. And now it's valued. I've always thought, man, role playing is even better than comic books because it's not so much giving you the characters as it creating a world for you to create your own characters. So it's perfect for Hollywood and others to create their own stories and characters in these amazing worlds. It's just no one's quite figured out how to do it yet, but hopefully we can help with that.
I think when you treat your setting as a character itself is how you really get it.
Yeah, absolutely.
As long as the setting develops and grows and changes over time, I think you're likely to get something that people will resonate with.
Yeah.
To give Marvel due credit, though, they always did have some really amazing stories. Some of the issues I enjoyed the most were actually the ones where they were just it was just them like the X-Men, like at the mansion, just being people and their interactions and just human drama. And it was so I like when humanity is put into something.
Absolutely. People forget Marvel was the runner-up. When I was growing up and all through the 90s, basically, right? Like DC had the powerhouse, really famous characters, Superman, Batman, all of that. The best Marvel had was Spider-Man. Yet Spider-Man isn't actually, they licensed out Spider-Man, basically sold it long ago.
Mm-hmm.
So when they came out with the IP for Disney bought it, right? They didn't have Spider-Man. And so they made do with a character almost no one had heard of before, Iron Man. And he became now Iron Man is as famous as Superman and probably more so in the world, It's amazing. And that's because I believe, I have huge respect for what they did in the early days at Marvel of creating human characters who had weaknesses and real lives, and they sort of brought that in.
And real struggles, and especially the X-Men, where my friends and I, we really felt it. There were so many, metaphors in the X-Men, and they resonated with so many people, all the downtrodden and the LGBT community, and it was the X-Men were special. I feel
they were originally representing civil rights, and they moved on. And were then, I don't want to say co-opted because they weren't. They kind of changed the focus to the LGBT, the Jibidaqua.
But it was, I just, the stories were so good. I mean, I remember crying and sobbing after reading an issue and being like, oh, why do they do this?
And they've pulled a lot of that off really well in movies as well. One of my favorite lines in all of Marvel cinema, I guess, is in one of the X-Men movies, where it's like a kind of almost throwaway line, but one of the parents says to the kid, have you thought about just not being a mutant? And it's so perfect. So many people who are in any way LGBTQ have experienced that exact moment. Have you tried just not being gay?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, never thought of that.
Have you tried? Yeah.
And here's the thing: is that for a long time that is how you dealt with it, right? Yeah. It's not that you pretended to yourself so much, although some people did do that, but you pretended to society, right? So all the bi people, right? Like you never told anyone, you just did it in secret. Or the gay people, you presented as straight, but you did your stuff in private, you know. And Tbilisi here, which is, you know, I'm in south of Russia, a lot of Russian refugees pouring in right now, by the way. Like there's this sauna that's famous since before communist times as being the gay bathhouse. And cool. and it would, but yet it was never formally that. Like it was just sort of like there were days you'd go there as a normal person, but on weekends it sort of became more of a gay thing. And it was like, but basically unspoken and shush, right? And so there's a whole culture there going on that was sort of allowed to happen. But no one really knew about it. It's kind of wild. But you know, fortunately, we don't have to live in a world where you're forced to keep who you are secret, right?
Yeah.
Which is not a healthy way to live. Let's face it. You know,
not at all. And I mean, and segueing into werewolves, I think that's a good intro into the werewolves, keeping who you are a secret. That's the angle we're going with our werewolves,
because they have what the TV tropes calls the masquerade, which is, you know, named after some game I seem to remember from the 90s.
Never heard of it.
It says right there on my name flag. I need to take that off, though. That's a bit embarrassing.
No, you don't.
Oh, okay.
Come on.
Just
remember, Mark, it's nepotism when it happens to other people. It's networking when it happens to you.
Yeah. I just have this ingrained. I just hate touting myself. It feels very embarrassing. But anyway, they have a masquerade where they basically don't reveal themselves. So they are living a hidden life. And last time we talked, actually, we said that within their own clans, they reveal who they are. And I just realized that that's wrong. We shouldn't have done that. That was a mistake.
Because word would get out. Yeah.
Is that they might know and they might find out, but they're not part of the rituals. They're not part of the secret world, and they're not initiated. And so they might know. They might figure it out. But they're not officially told.
It's like that dark family secret. If you find out that someone's a werewolf,
members of the family in on it, and there's some not, and that is, oh my God, members of a family who know a secret, others don't. That's half the great Shakespeare stories I know.
Right.
You know, that's like good storytelling. Like a secret in a family is just the idea of it makes me anxious. Like, you know, I immediately shoot in mind, what does my sister know about my family that I don't? What is my wife keeping from me? What has happened to my kids they're not telling me? Like these things, like suddenly I am paralyzed with like
wonder.
How does a werewolf know?
Stairs in my place. I hope they don't start drilling. I have not been up there once to look. When I was younger, I would have been checking it out every week to see how it's going. I'm not curious anymore, right? I've lost curiosity for stuff like that. But when it comes to shit like this, oh boy, right? That means it's got fire.
Okay. So then we need to figure out how you know that you're a werewolf.
Oh, yeah. Like, what is that? What is your rite of passage for that? What is your moment?
Not even the rite of passage. It's the where is the moment of coming aware? How do you know that you're going to turn into a werewolf?
Or that you're different?
I think you manifest.
So you turn into a wolf one day?
Like, are there any signs leading up to it?
I think you get angry and a fang appears in your hand as you're holding it up, and a fang appears. And those in the family who know just pull you away. It's not the whole thing. I think learning to fully change, that's like that happens in a big ritual, and it's in the full moon of your moon, whatever your moon is.
Right.
And and that's a violent thing. But your manifest.
Yeah.
Your first manifest is like a small part of your body changing.
So kind of like a puberty almost, like some signs, like you're starting to feel different. You don't know, and it
happens at puberty. So it happens earlier for girls than boys.
Right. I think it should happen first with personality shift and changes that aren't immediately physically visible.
Like the hormonal kind of equivalent.
Yeah. So that the people who know that you're acting pretty closely to this one vial, which means you might be influenced by that moon.
Oh,
and
that's
we might
interesting.
need to have the talk with you.
Yeah, because our moons are very influential, and it would be interesting if, when you're young and you start turning into a teenager, that's when you start making some mistakes. You're figuring things out. You're doing some daring. But what if, like, what they gravitate to is their sort of secret vial, like the moon is dictating that. And that's and that's where the difference between our amortals and our accursed is the accursed sort of kind of end up falling into that and going with it. And, but the amortals, it's like, that's the sign of like what moon. Oh yes, they were born under this moon. And, and that's kind of the moon that starts trying to push at them and starts to make them. Yeah. And that's the curse. Yes.
The moon is the curse.
Yeah. So like heartless starts to show, gutless starts to show, or something like it, and it manifests itself in these sort of behaviors. And imagine like being that, like hearing tales of werewolves exist, whispered secrets, and no one's allowed to talk about it. And then feeling like you're a kid and feeling that those changes start to happen. And that a little bit of self-realization, like maybe some don't realize until a physical change, and they're just flowing with their emotions. But then some kind of internalize, and they start like wondering what's happening to them.
And it would be particularly difficult because as you were, if you're keeping the fact that werewolves exist a secret, you can't tell the kids that, hey, if you start feeling really pulled on by a vile moon, let us know. Because then you're giving away the secret. So it has to be something that everybody keeps very low key. So
and
as a kid
too, because there's this whole tradition in Lauren, like on Earth, of having children that you take from your rivals and your vassals, and then you raise them as your own. And anyone who's watched Game of Thrones knows about this. Thank you, Game of Thrones, for teaching this thing that went on. The Byzantine Empire did it. The Ottoman Empire did it. In fact, that's where the myth of Vlad Tep comes from. He was a hostage in the Ottoman Empire palace, was raised basically in the, what do they call it? Oh, I forgot now. The where all the concubines, all the wives of the
harem?
The harem. He was raised in the harem without a mother. Can you imagine? The harem is a conspiracy swirling, horrible world of women trying to make their children the sultan. You know why? Because whoever became sultan would kill everyone else who they're raised with. If you don't raise your child to win and you win, then you and your whole lineage are dead. I mean, oh my God. Think about, the ultimate death match, right? I mean, that's vicious. That's horrible. By the way, we need to do a whole story about that. Which of our kingdoms has that kind of setup? That's horrifying.
That's a question for Seth.
Yeah.
I think that we do have the Chinese have a similar system, and we do have a kingdom where the pureborn came over who have a Han ancestry. So we can do that there, and that's a pretty interesting setup, right? You know,
I mean, you could also do something where if you have raised them through the harem, if you did a patriarchal line, you whoever becomes the sultan just castrates everyone else they were raised with.
Oh, that's another way to do it. Yeah,
you know, so that they can stay alive as long as they're loyal, but you make sure that they can't.
Yeah.
What do you do to your sisters? All the sisters.
Do they get passed to the next best? I mean, I don't know. I would imagine they wouldn't want to. They're, would they really want to just kill all their people? Because then, where do their soldiers come from? Where do their children come from? Where do it's kind of like. So yeah, they probably they repurpose.
Yeah.
So to speak.
When the new sultan comes up, all the old concubines become his concubines.
By the way, it's very interesting is that the Turks conquered the old Constantinople lands, and it became Turkey, and it became the Ottoman Empire, right? Mm-hmm. But for hundreds of years, the sultans basically their children were made from the harem, right? And the harem women were the most beautiful women they could find, and so a lot of them were Georgian because Georgia was noted for these beautiful women. So after 5 generations of it, the emperors basically weren't Turkish. They looked a lot of their harem was either Ukrainian, like Nordic looking, or Georgian, and so they had hardly any Turkish blood at all. Yet they ruled the Ottoman Empire, but they had a minuscule amount of Turkish blood because after 5 generations, it's distilled down so much, which I think is so fascinating, right? The Ottoman Empire was only at first ruled by Turks. At the end, not at all.
Okay, so if you are a young werewolf, Wereborn, and you don't know it yet, so you start having this feeling like the moons are controlling your mood or your actions, but you'd feel very alone with this because as far as you know, this isn't something that happens. And so until the adults notice that you're going through this and take you aside to tell you, that would be very, scary, alone feeling, which I think anyone who's ever been through puberty can identify with.
Yeah.
We've all had those times where we thought, this is happening to me and only me. I didn't know other people go through these things or have these thoughts or, we'll dream about these things or imagine those things or whatever.
Yes. Thinking back at those moments of like agonizing and their embarrassment of your confusion. No. There's a reason why like these Bildungsroman, these rite of passage stories are so powerful because they're universal. We've all gone through them, and we've never fully recovered from them.
It's about being relatable,
and more importantly, I think we all realize on some level that we're still affected by it. Like we're still sort of trying to figure our way out of what happened to us,
Right.
And let's face it, there aren't really that many moments in a lifetime where there's like a sudden dramatic transformation.
Right.
That's universal, at least. Like marriage is maybe one, and then there's death.
Yep.
Retirement, I guess, in the West is seen as like a big transformation, but even that's much less than it used to be.
I would say one of the big ones is the knowledge of your mortality, which also kind of gets us back to the Badlander idea of, because the Badlander moats, it's their last one. And so unlike everybody else on Lorne who knows that when they die, they'll be reborn again and again, a Badlander knows that when they die, that's it. It's a realization that happens to a lot of people.
Maybe that's the spur, by the way, that we put into the novel
Yeah.
They have the blight spur in their moat, which is their halo, their which represents their soul.
Right.
So maybe the Badlanders also have the blight spur.
Right.
You know?
And it's just a sign that your moat is near shattering.
Yeah, it's
starting to splinter.
It's on its last legs. You've
but
lived many lives, or either that, or your last life was really brutal.
Yeah, but that's another universal experience people go through. They call that oftentimes the thing that ends your childhood, is that moment when you realize you're going to die someday.
So maybe that's the thing, that these kids, it's not so much that there's lucky ones or whatever. No, they're the kids in the werewolf families, in the Wereborn families, who have the amortal moats.
Yeah.
So they're Wereborn life after life after life.
Yeah.
Although if we do something as simple as you can tell by looking at their moat, we take away any of the possibility that somebody might go unnoticed until they have the big bursting change.
Oh yeah, we should say that. We should say that blight spurs are tiny and can only be seen by people who are expert at reading modes. So it's a very
maybe a werewolf. It's only visible in their wolf form. Maybe it's not visible in their human form.
Maybe
it might be that their spur might not appear until the first time they shift.
Yeah, it could be like something that their moat transforms to, because we do have. Like we do always ask the question, what happens to your moat when you become one of these sort of monster player classes or characters? And it's like with the vampires, what happens to their moat? It's sort of bound. It's bound to them now. So there's different things that can happen when you become an immortal.
Yeah.
So the Wereborn, it shows this transformation, but it'd be cool if only when they transform.
Right. It's like the idea of in the vampire system, the Vampire Masquerade system, there was the aura perception, and vampires have paler auras and werewolves have really bright auras, and all that kind of stuff. If it was something that you could always tell by looking at someone's aura, great, but there's that moment in between. You'd always run into this a lot of times, werewolf, when people wanted to play the kinfolk who changes really late.
Yeah.
And so then there's the question of, can you tell that they were a werewolf before they changed? Well, no.
Right.
Something has to change.
Yeah. Something does.
So I think having the moat actually change when they first shift into werewolf would be a cool thing.
Yeah. And I think that because how many people would actually be moat reading wolves? So it's another way to stay hidden, is if it's more visible when in their wolf form than it is in their human form, then it's not as apparent, even for moat readers. That way it kind of keeps them also hidden.
What if when they have the manifest moment, what if there's often a moment where they also, and I don't want to say rage, so let's say they turn feral, have a feral moment, animalistic moment. So that's when they realize their own mortality, they see death, as Joe has mentioned before, right? So somehow we tie that in together. So they manifest, and then maybe they do some act of violence, or they lose themselves a little bit, like they grow the fang and then they run off, become animal-like for a day and have to be found, and then they're sort of like, what happened to me? What it's like,
What if they do that without a physical change? So like first you become you start acting very feral.
Oh yeah.
You run off and people have to chase you down, and
you wake up in the woods.
You to balance the wolf inside of you. Are you able to
my idea is that just to make it dramatic, sort of a movie, TV visual style way, is that they have this big emotional encounter with someone, maybe anger, maybe passion, maybe something, and somehow something happens, and then they manifest the wolf in one small way. A tooth grows, a fang grows, without talon, whatever. And then they kind of like get overcome with the wolf, and they're still human. They're not turned into a wolf, but they run off. So you have, it's a 1-2 thing. you know?
Yeah. The problem with the physical manifestation is keeping it a secret from other people.
Yeah.
Because if you are in your group of friends and one of your friends suddenly grows a fang and acts like an animal and runs off into the woods,
yeah,
that's not as far of a leap into that guy might be a werewolf.
Well,
as,
I think then that basically, yeah, the members of the family who've seen that, they're basically a member of an exclusive club, right?
right.
Well, it
You
could be
know?
that it can happen that way, but it doesn't always happen that way. So maybe sometimes it happens that way, sometimes it doesn't. So it depends on the individual. So that way you can tell your own story of how it manifests.
Oh, I like that.
And it's kind of like that. There's a little bit of that way. It's not kind of, oh, this always
Yeah.
happens.
And the way the society works is sometimes they can see the blight spur, right? And so they know to put them in a certain group that is safe, right?
Yeah.
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 And they definitely don't put them with servants who are, they always have them be, the children they think could switch. They've always sort of put them in special situations.
Because I'm also envisioning the story where, someone's 12-year-old, the family goes to bed at night and they wake up and the child's missing. And, they're like, oh my God, like what happened? And they're looking for the child. And then the child comes like wandering in, and their clothes are kind of dirty and they've been, and they look very confused and it's like, where have you been? It's this sort of like missing child kind of thing. And they have no idea. And the child's confused and they're trying to figure out what happened. And there's some people who know the sign. And it's like, it could be a very like dramatic backstory to be like that missing child, or maybe the child doesn't return. Maybe they're snatched by a secret group who's like, you can't return to your family. Like, this is what's happening to you. Or
maybe there's like a series of signs. And if you notice the sign early enough, you grab the kid and you take him aside and you're like, hey, here's what you have to look forward to. This is what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And other kids will kind of hide it naturally on themselves until the day that they wolf out. Yeah. And that's where you get people who obviously, you can't really keep that secret.
Yeah.
But then we can go ahead and have the full, if we want, the full out version of, oh, when you turned into a werewolf, you freaked out and murdered your family.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. The cover up.
Yeah. And not have that be something that happens for everyone, because that's really not sustainable and keeping a secret. But, if people watch very carefully because they want to make sure that you don't have that happen.
Yeah.
So in a community where there's known to probably be a wereborn children around, you keep an eye on all the kids as they're about to start going through puberty. And anytime you see that sign, you grab the kid and start, separating them.
I think we're pretty good at seeing the signs.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But there's
always those late bloomers, the ones who like take some extra years.
Absolutely.
There's always those kids too.
There's always the kid where their moat showed up in a part of the family that people didn't expect, and so they weren't looking for it with that one.
Yeah.
Now we were talking about how werewolves can make people not see them and sort of mind control people into not, which I thought was a bit fuzzy. And there's another game I worked on decades ago about werewolves where I sort of threw that in. Yeah. And I always thought it was a bit fuzzy and it wasn't properly, it was very convenient, but it didn't really mythologically fit. So if we're going to do that, which I think is actually kind of important, there's a way in which you can mind veil people, or get them to forget. Maybe it's a dream thing where they can remember it, but the next time they go to sleep, you can enter their dreams and sort of erase it, But that's pretty wild. That's sort of a incubi thing, right? We have the incubi in Highlander.
Yeah. Well, I mean, dreams are very important concept in our world too. We do a lot with dreams, so I kind of feel like there are a lot of mysteries to the connection of the dream world and the Lawthorn. So I don't think that's so far fetched to say that that has something to do with it. Because like, you go to sleep and your brain kind of processes your day and what happens, and it's kind of, we all need to sleep. Um, and then you wake up and sometimes the things you were feeling the day before seem kind of ludicrous or weird. It's like, why did I, after you've had some sleep and you think about stuff, that's why it's like sleep on it is a term. So
Right.
somebody who's like experienced that might wake up after a sleep and kind of be like, I don't know what I was thinking, so
what if we really lean into the dream thing and have it be that when you start going through the shift, you shift into the dream world, and that's why the kid disappears. It's not that they run off into the woods, it's that they end up in the Trow world,
kind of like slipping sideways.
Trow home, yeah. And when they learn how to be a wolf, and then they come back into the regular world. And so it's kind of it's a big secret, but
did we make them the ones that are allied with or aligned with the Pharaoh?
With the
I don't know if we made them aligned or not.
Doesn't matter. We can still use it. We can tie it.
Yeah. And it would be a great way to also then tie us to our Trow game eventually. Down the line of one of the things that might happen is you might come over thinking that you're a Beastknight and turn out to be actually your Trow.
Yeah, which is interesting when you think about, very, very light foundations that we're talking about here with both games, and Trow especially. We've only lightly touched on that, but the idea that Trow are children born in the material world, and right. That they're, the Trow are trying to get them back. And here you have werewolves slipping into the Trow home. It's almost like an exchange, like a weird kind of, it's like one's trying to they're trying to pull back in, and the other, they're trying to get out. Like, what are you doing here? Get out. Like you don't belong
But
here.
Then we have the huge secret of, all of a sudden Timmy just disappeared one night.
Yeah.
He went to bed, and when everybody woke up, he was just gone. Some people are freaking out. His friends his age are freaking out, all kind of stuff. But there are a couple of adults who are like, it's fine, he'll be back.
So my concern with affiliating them too closely with Trohome is it starts to overlap with the other game that Mark created. It starts to sound like the Umbra kind of stuff to me.
That's fair.
And I feel we don't want to repeat the same, I think we need to do our own unique thing. So that's something to keep in mind.
Because
we want to stay away from rage, protectors of nature, and Umbra,
and it's spirit travelers.
Right. Now, obviously, all those things have become like part of the culture's idea of werewolves, right?
Yeah,
right.
Like it's become used in all forms of storytelling,
pop culture,
which I'm kind of proud of. Just like I'm proud of like the idea of werewolves versus vampires has become universal, right?
Yeah,
and that didn't used to be true until sort of I accidentally made that up, right? I wish I could say I had it all planned out, but it just seemed, or it was like, hey, it's the first two games, they have to be enemies, right? It was just an obvious thing. It wasn't really planned out. It was just like, oh, they hate each other. Of course they do. But in this case, okay, so how do they cover up? We could do Trow Light, Dreams Light, right? So maybe disappearing into Trowland is a bit much. But yeah, maybe when they turn into an animal until they go to sleep, and then they come out of it. So they think they're an animal, they live like an animal, they are an animal, even if they're in human form, right? So they're feral, right? We should use. I love that word feral, and I don't think I've ever used it in a game, but it's a great word. It's not offensive to anyone, is it? I don't think so.
No.
And
not to my knowledge.
Yeah, you never know. I'm sure someone does.
Yeah.
But if it's it's sort of like, I don't know. It's wild though.
Yeah. Well, yeah. For now, anyway, I think it should be all right. So
that they basically they go feral. The question is then how do people not remember this? Like if you're like a villager and you happen to see this feral kid run by with like talons on his hand, like how do you not remember that?
Yeah, that's the problem.
Like what is the mythic thing? Like the tropes are the vampire thing. You look in their eyes and you make them forget. But we don't want to do that because that's a very vampire thing.
What if you don't forget it? You just have a different explanation. So you see a kid run by with claws acting like a monster, and you don't think, oh gosh, that guy must be a werewolf. You think, oh no, there's some blight going around. This kid's been blighted.
Right. Because blight's a thing.
Yeah.
What if there were
a different
rumors?
Explanation for
it?
What
if these noble families are famous for being inbred?
Well, that's because that is a thing. Yeah.
And blighted.
Right.
And so they're noted for doing crazy things. And so
what if there are more tales of blight doing physical transformations? What if that isn't so unusual? And it's easily explained. It's automatically going to be assumed any weird physical anomaly is going to be, oh, they've got the blight.
The problem is that blighted people are thus vileborn. So you could be a noble, a highborn, and if you showed traits of being blighted, you become a vileborn. So it's just as bad as.
But the vileborn are born from blight. It's possible as a nobleman to get blighted, right?
You can become a vileborn. You can be a royal and get leprosy, and if you're kicked out from the family, you can become a vileborn.
Okay, then that's something that most beast knights would have to deal with, is that they would publicly be vileborn at that point. It would the exception would be to be able to completely just hide that you're royal because they caught it fast enough.
Yeah, if they were seen and they've been sort of marked by society as a vileborn, then that's the life they kind of have to live.
Yeah.
But in a way, that's hiding in plain sight too. So it's a way to utilize that.
But it would give them that motivation to try and catch the signs as early as possible so that you can prevent this kid from running through town looking like a werewolf or acting like a wolf.
Right.
But around those times when you can't, he becomes a vileborn and, c'est la vie.
What I think is maybe it's fear. Like that's the big thing about werewolves we haven't really discussed much is that, like vampires are different, right?
Right.
They're creepy and scary, but seductive. So you want to be next to them. You don't want to run away, right? But werewolves are absolutely can scare the fuck out of you, right? You're scared of being eaten alive and torn apart. Yeah. So what if one of the Taxons, I don't know if they're still the ones who do stuff, but if one of the Taxons, their job is to protect the masquerade, and if someone saw something, they go to them and they scare the fuck out of them. And that fear is so severe, in some cases, they actually can forget what they saw. So it's fear-based.
So they have basically a control group who actually seek out people who have witnessed, and they essentially make them forget in their own way.
Yeah. And then it doesn't have to mystical.
You did not see that. Tell me again what you saw. No, you did not see that. What you saw is a child. You don't even know which child, do you?
Yeah. Especially if
you didn't see nothing.
How dare you say a claw? Are you insane?
I can see a very mafia mentality of this. Like, you didn't see nothing. It's a nice house you got here.
What did you actually see? Yeah. Tell me what you. But no, I mean also
burn you at the stake.
if their houses are going to be, if they are going to be like integrated into Highborn, and respected houses, that will be put them in a position where it's fairly easy to do that, because they're going to have some semblance of money and control. So, because these aren't going to be straight from the woods werewolves, these are integrated into society werewolves,
right?
And so it's a whole different ball game, so to speak, and so it completely makes sense that there's a whole taxon that dedicated to that's what they do, is they go and they clean up that.
And we could make make one of the Wereborn backgrounds be that this taxon wasn't able to do it, or you made too much of a spectacle, and so the story was you were blighted, now you're Wereborn,
and you're forced to live as a Wereborn, because they weren't.
And in secret you can attend all the family shit, but you're living as a Wereborn.
Right.
Yeah.
And that could be a cool background.
Yeah.
It's funny when we play test in any of these games, to fill people in who haven't played, is that you can actually play in Badlander. You can play a royal, you can play a highborn, you can play anointed, a member of the family, the prophet, a member of the church, a burgher, a rich person, or you can play like an outlaw, an outcast, a lowborn, a peasant.
Yeah.
Or even a Wereborn, the lowest of the low. Like, everyone hates you. And like, people always go, why would I want to play a Wereborn? And I go, well, do you want to play a Wereborn? Oh yeah, it's cool. Well, that's why people like, but wouldn't I really want to be a royal? Yeah, a royal's great, but there are restrictions.
Hey, the first character I ever made, I chose Wereborn. So
like,
it's my choice.
Picking someone who's low down is often way more fun. Like, as a character.
I mean, if I was going to live in that world, I'd want to be a royal, because being royal means that you have more privilege.
Or merchant.
So, of course, that's what you'd want. But if you're going to make a character, you want a character that's going to suffer.
Yeah.
Because that's the real core of any character, is you create this character and then make them suffer.
Yeah.
Yes. And if you don't want to make your character suffer, then what you should say is that as the other characters are leaving to go on a mission or an adventure, is you say, no, I'm holding back. I'll do guard duty.
Right.
And that way you're not going to suffer. But of course you don't want to do that.
Right. That's boring in a game. But it's in any story, you need the story to always be, you establish the status quo for a character, and then you destroy it.
Yeah.
And it's
very cathartic to either to write or to create or to read or witness that. It's very, very cathartic.
Yeah. And no one wants to read a story where a character goes about their life and everything works out just fine.
Yeah, right. The Mary Sue story. Yeah.
No, you want to watch read a story where things go badly and the person has to overcome conflict.
Chaos and fire and
their own inner weakness is a part of it.
Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. That they have something, that's the Mary Sue thing, is that too many of these modern characters, both male and female, are just
the struggle with failure. There has to be a struggle with failure somewhere. Like that's the whole point. And that's the problem with Mary Sue characters. They don't fail, really. They're like, their failures are minimal and forgivable. It's not like they have to make a character that really, really screws up is like,
let's talk a minute about Raiders of the Lost Ark. Did you guys watch Big Bang Theory at all?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's that whole episode where they say, Raiders of the Lost Ark would have worked better if Indiana Jones had just done nothing.
Yeah, it doesn't. The whole plot doesn't matter, because in the end, it would have been the same result.
Yeah. They present that as if it was a flaw in the story, but it's not. It's the core of what makes the story interesting. Indiana Jones, throughout the entire movie, is constantly doing the wrong thing over and over again and losing. Yeah. He is failing to avoid setting off the trap at the very beginning. He is having to run from the native tribe there. Then he is starting the fight with the Russian guys that burns down the bar when he's just coming to talk to Marion. Mm-hmm. Then he's chasing her down, and then he's accidentally leading them to the Ark. And, all of the things are him not being successful. and he's failing and failing
That's
and
true.
failing and failing.
Yeah.
But his maintaining thing is that he just is so resilient that he just keeps going.
Mhm.
And so eventually
the best superpower ever is resilience for a
Right.
character.
Yeah.
Not even superpower, the best power, like, is resilience. It's a great quality because it really, in real life,
Yeah.
right? Like being able to suffer or fail and come back from it is really the key to life. It's the key solution to every problem. Is that you get knocked down
and get back up.
Yep.
Yeah.
and you just get back up and you keep going.
You fall
And
off the
people
horse
think
into a mud puddle and you get back up, change your poncho. That happened to me.
And
Fell off
people
a
who
horse
can't do
right
that
into a mud puddle.
are live horrible lives, right?
Yeah.
And they're running. People who run from failure are shocked, horrified, and you can't deal. And that's why
Now-
life suffering is actually useful, because it makes you a resilient person.
There are points where sometimes you maybe should pack it up. And Indiana Jones faces several of those. And it's his character flaw that doesn't allow him to do it.
Yeah.
Because without that character flaw, when he realized the Nazis are digging in the wrong place, he should have been like, cool, they're never going to find it. Let's go home.
Mm-hmm.
But he doesn't do that because he has that insatiable curiosity of, if they're digging in the wrong place and not finding it, that doesn't mean it's not there. That means it's somewhere else and I can find it.
There is also a lot of chance in the Indiana Jones movies. He's just luck is on his side, and it's not always his skill. It's just luck. Like, I'm thinking of Last Crusade, which is probably my favorite.
Right.
And that one,
Really?
like, there were just I really loved that one with Sean Connery in it too. Like, I loved the father-son thing. And it's just like, and he's still learning from his father in that. And it's, like, there's still things he's messing up. You wouldn't bring the diary all the way here, and he's like, he did bring the, like, it's in his pocket, and he's just like, like he's screwing up. But like, just the chance, like, the sheer luck that he's, able to somehow get through some of these circumstances. And it's
and it's not
and he's
always
still being
good luck.
reprimanded by his father, who's like using simple solutions sometimes. Like, and it's, like, he's overthinking things, and I love it.
I just interrupt really quickly. Is that Francesco Napoleano, who is the game designer between the One Ring RPG and who's done all the board games with the Lord of the Rings. He has a game store in Venice, Italy, where he grew up and lives.
Yeah.
He lives in Venice. When I visit Venice, I always check in with him. He has a game store that's literally built into the cathedral in Venice, which all those scenes in Venice in that movie, that literally is the square, and that's the church in which his game store is built as part of that church.
Oh, that's so cool.
God, that's awesome.
Yeah. And I checked the church. There's no vaults underneath, unfortunately.
You look thoroughly.
I brought a crowbar. I pried up every.
But Last Crusade is another example of him constantly screwing up, and it's always him not. There's always the intellectual side of it, of when he actually buckles down and pays attention. It's very different.
Yeah.
But you had the beginning of Last Crusade, him saying X never ever marks the spot.
Yeah.
And then there's kind of the running gag through the movie of X keeps marking the spot.
Yeah.
And it's always he doesn't quite figure out all these things, but then he figures out a little detail, he gets a little bit closer, and there's the puzzle part of it. But it's still him screwing up over and over and over again.
Yeah.
That's kind of a role-playing thing too, right? Like, role-playing is often that way as well, right?
Indiana Jones movies are perfect role-playing games.
Role-playing games, I think people don't understand enough that failure is more fun than success, and game masters, or in our world, our games, we say tail spinner. They have a tendency to want to give people success that makes people happy in the moment, but really, what makes people happy in the long run is failure, big success.
Yeah,
failure, big success. That is the cadence that is more suited to what creates a beautiful story.
Yeah, you
right?
need to constantly fail upwards.
Unless you failed a whole bunch of times.
Yeah. And stumbling over yourself and over what you think you're supposed to be doing and being the cause of whatever big problem is always great. You know, the greatest stories are the ones where the players are the ones that unleash the great monster that they end up killing. And so, yes, they saved the world, but it's kind of like you saved it, but it wouldn't have been in trouble without you. So you kind of just cleaned up your own mess.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And that's great. I love those stories.
Yeah.
I think it's one of the reasons that the TV show Supernatural was so popular and successful. Because that show is constantly about them making the world much, much worse and then pulling it back a little.
Yeah.
And trying to undo their own mistake. And they have a couple of episodes where they'll draw attention to that. And other people will be like, you know, we wouldn't have these many problems if it wasn't for these two guys trying to hunt monsters.
Yeah. Making a bigger
We
mess
need to stop them.
Yeah. It's the interference with fate and interference with, with the natural flow of things. It's kind of like, no, I can't have it be that way. I have to interfere. Well, now you've really screwed everything up.
So sorry to go back suddenly, but I just realized a good name, or at least a nickname for the Taxon who goes after people who witness things they shouldn't have. They're the fearmongers.
Yeah.
Which I think is hilarious. The idea that, because, you know, of course, it suggests that our modern version of it is wrong, and that originally they were literally fearmongers. Because monger means a person who sells in the market, right? Like a meat monger, or a monger means someone who's, hey, come over here, I got a good sale. It's a monger, So a fearmonger is like selling you on the fact that you're afraid. It's hilarious to me.
Giving them the idea of somebody coming to your house and saying, either you didn't see nothing, or you didn't see what you think you saw.
Yeah.
Or maybe you saw something, maybe you didn't, but if you tell anyone, you're both going to die. Or
it's what you actually saw was a lot more dangerous, and you would be best off forgetting what you saw. Yeah.
Right.
Like,
and what happens, I think, is that their power makes people who, if they're about to tell someone what they saw, then this fear comes up within them. And they remember that moment, and then suddenly they can't speak because they're so terrified. Right? So they're perfectly normal. And
it's almost like it makes me think of, now I'm thinking like one of the Captain Americas, like the Winter Soldier, the way they programmed him so that certain like things triggered his mind to react in certain ways. It's like that kind of like,
it's like a post-hypnotic suggestion.
Yes. That's what I'm.
So when you think to start talking about this,
that
you're going to start to panic.
It makes you, it makes your heart palpitate, and it makes you not want to talk about it because it makes you recoil from it. Yeah.
So kind of, I want you to think of all the tortures that I could unleash upon you and your loved ones. And I want you to think very carefully about that every time you consider telling someone about this.
Okay, so we have a triad of the Badlanders who work for the Crown.
Mm-hmm.
Yet the Crown is allied with the vampires, so they can't directly fight the vampires. They still hate them because they're immortal. Mm-hmm. And then we have the vampires and the werewolves, and they hate each other because the vampires stole the werewolves' hellholes and fireholds, and sort of became the guardians and reaping the rewards of sort of protecting the world from the hellholes, and the werewolves sort of feel that was theirs. Right, and now they're vastly reduced and forced to hide, basically, as mortal lords. But
forced to hide and let vampires survive. I mean,
what if the hatred isn't reciprocal? What if it's not werewolves and Badlanders hate each other? It's Badlanders hate werewolves
because they're monsters.
Werewolves hate vampires. Vampires hate Badlanders.
Werewolves, it would be interesting if they try. I could see them trying to manipulate and plant like like trying to lead Badlanders to the vampires, trying to get the Badlanders to get rid of the vampires for them. It's almost like, so I could see them actually wanting to sort of ally with Badlanders to kind of push them in a direction with unknowingly, get into the guilds and the
vampires might want to get the Badlanders, or the Badlanders might want to get in with the vampires, because if their moat's about to shatter, their only hope is to become an immortal.
Yeah, those that are
since you can't be turned into a Beastknight, you can be turned into a Fang Knight.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like the three-way arrows. So the arrows one direction go hate, and the other direction they go fear.
Right.
Yeah.
So that creates an interesting dynamic.
Yeah, because if you have hate both ways, you end up with a war that lasts a week, and then one side is wiped out.
Yeah.
It's
you know.
I mean, I could see the vampires being almost indifferent to the werewolves.
We should do a Rochambeau thing where the reason that no one ever gets the control is that one side can side with the other, and it's hard to get the power. Now, definitely Badlanders should be the weakest of the three, right? The other two have vast resources, but what Badlanders do have is they do have access to the guilds, which are the human world's equivalent to money, and to the royals, which is the
support,
the control of the world,
full political support.
Yeah.
They've got
numbers.
They've got all mobility and numbers.
Yeah.
Is their major thing.
So Rochambeau style, which is hammer, paper, scissors. What are the balance of power then? Like vampires have money because they have the fire holds. The werewolves have secrecy. No one knows who they are.
Which we should really lean into, so they could have a lot of political power.
I mean, normally in storytelling, whatever group has who are hidden, they're whoever's clandestine, has the power of, like, they tend to be associated with assassination, with murder, and we kind of given that to the Shadow Vein and all that, and the Duskwatch. But so how do we give that to the werewolves and not take it away from the Badlanders?
Well, the Badlanders and the Shadow Vein are going to be very subtle the whole way through. Werewolves are going to be the iron glove in the silk, or the iron hand in the silken glove.
Well, I kind of see it as like the Duskwatch. Everybody knows who the Duskwatch are. I'm not the Dusk. And it's like it's kind of like, yeah, we know what they're about, even though they're being on the down low. Like all of the lowborn know what's going on. The bullying and the so it's almost like the other two, the Shadow Vein. They're believed. I guess some believe they exist, some don't. The Fang Knights know they're there. So yeah, they're probably hard to find, but I could see the werewolves being sort of like similar to that. Like they're just not believed to exist. So they're really like deep undercover in a way. But their placement, similar to the Shadow Vein, their placement is very strategic. So it's interesting to me that you'll have both the Shadow Vein and the Wereborn doing these sort of deep undercover kind of positions. So it's like you never know when one or the other is going to turn up or be uncovered. So, and they might cross paths with each other sometimes. So
to me, the Wereborn make the perfect sleeper agents.
Yeah.
Because you can have one guy who is, the foppish courtier or the jester, and then somebody comes in to kill the king, and all of a sudden the jester turns into a werewolf.
Yeah.
And murders everybody in the room. You've got one guy who looks unassuming, who seems totally normal, but all of a sudden turns into this just whirling death.
All right. So the Wereborn, their advantage is surprise.
Right.
Yes.
The vampires,
their advantage is patience.
Yeah. Yeah. The Shadowbane.
Patience.
Well, also they're callous. The Shadowbane are just, they have no caring. See, at least the werewolves seem to they have humanity in them. So it's like, but the Shadowbane, I feel like don't almost. It's like, so they have that callousness, that coldness, that like lack of empathy. The Shadowbane have, a evil on their side or whatever. It's like, they don't care. They're dead inside.
Yeah. But that, and you add that to malevolent patience.
Yes.
And it becomes kind of a terrifying possibility.
The Wereborn also have purpose.
Yeah.
Because they are also, again, trying to play a long game of strategy. They're trying to get themselves back where they want to be. So they're not just doing this to bide time or day by day and just to like live peacefully. They have, I feel like they've also got plans for change in the future. So,
and giving them that need to create plans and have plans without giving them that patience that a vampire would have is a nice combination also.
Yeah.
Because it makes it much harder to
not just throw down and kick ass.
Right.
Yeah.
Because they would probably sit down at one point and be like, all right, how many of us are there? Could we win this war if we really kicked it off?
Yeah.
And as long as the answer is maybe or no, they're not going to do it. And they're going to keep trying to arrange things, but it's always going to be somebody trying to make sure that there's a purpose and something they're focusing on, where the werewolves are going to, or the vampires are going to be like, okay, we need to make sure that the werewolves never get to that point. So anytime they start going more popular, we need to make sure that we have someone hunting them, hence Badlanders. So in a way, the vampires could look at the Badlanders as the tool that they have seeded into society to deal with.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So the Fang Knights are trying to use the Badlanders against the werewolves. The werewolves are trying to use the Badlanders against the Fang Knights. And the Badlanders are kind of like, well, we don't trust any of you. So like, it's really, the Badlanders like, we're trying to protect humanity.
If we do this triangle thing, the vampires hate the Badlanders and the Badlanders fear them.
No,
I can see having Amortals hate each other is not a good idea. When you put something as strong and passionate as hate, it makes it really hard to have them ever get along. And I like the idea that you could have a gaming group where you have a Fang Knight and a Beastknight and a Badlander.
That's always easy. You're just the exception.
Well, I feel like the Fang Knights at this point, where their positioning is now, I feel like the Fang Knights are probably getting a little comfortable with where they are. I feel like they feel like they've secured a solid position. I feel like they're kind of like, oh, they're like, the werewolves are like a little insect problem. It's like they're there, they know they're there, but they don't worry about it too much. They're probably a little more indifferent and just like, the dogs. And
I like the idea of the vampires have gotten complacent.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why the Shadowbane, their whole thing is they're laying low, letting the Fang Knights get complacent. And so the Fang Knights are doing more than just fire holds. They're building the mask holds. They're spreading themselves thinner because they think they've won and defeated all of their opponents. That, yes, there are still Beast Knights around, but now they're basically working for us. And there are Badlanders, but they're basically working for us. Everybody is basically,
and they agreed to lay low and pretend they don't exist, so we're not worried about them because they're doing their job. They're doing what the agreement. They're following that agreement, so we're not going to worry about it. And
have it be that everybody else is going, okay, the vampires are getting really complacent. So time's coming where we're going to erupt into chaos, because that's also the key to whether you have a good game is you have everything on that eve of chaos. If there were, say, a red star that suddenly appears in the sky, telling everybody that the world's about to end, that's when you want to start your game.
Okay, so what is it then that the Badlanders react to why do they want to kill and hunt werewolves?
Money.
So my things are that first of all they represent the old truths. But here's the problem with that is that the Badlanders are themselves metalborn.
Right. So that wouldn't be the reason.
They're the trope of the native scouts, right?
Right.
Like so a lot of them are old truths. So why would they wouldn't really hate or resent or whatever word we're going to use?
Not for that purpose.
So that doesn't really work.
Right.
Hiding. Well, a lot of Badlanders are hiding. You know. So that doesn't really work either. They're a danger to the royals. Yes, okay, that's getting there. You know, they represent sort of the interests of the highborn.
Right.
Again, and remember the highborn and the royals are conflicting each other, and this is true in any society.
Yeah.
Right.
This is something that people often don't understand about history, is that the highest elite are constantly trying to manage the elite underneath them to keep them from stealing their position, right? So that there's a huge conflict between them,
right.
You know, and so there's always this sort of, you know, yin yang thing where they basically hate the generals essentially who work for them, and that's what great lords were in the medieval period. They were just generals, right? They had their own armies, and that makes them very dangerous, as we know from Prigozhin marching on Moscow right now. You know, giving someone their own army, you know, even if you control Russia, the biggest country in the world, an army of 25,000 is an extreme danger, right? And a medieval lord could easily have 25,000. Well, not easily, but could have 25,000 person army, right?
Yeah,
they could. So what is it that makes the Badlanders are so aggressive towards Wereborn?
Well, I think that one of the things that makes Badlanders interesting is that they're not well organized. You know, they're a group, they're basically a ton of independent groups working together. You know,
they don't even have sergeants.
Right. That makes them
sergeants is a familiar term of honor, but they don't have. They have a different leader depending on what situation they're in.
Right, which makes it incredibly hard to try and predict what they're going to do, and incredibly hard to try and destroy them because you can't cut off the head. There is no head,
and there's small teams.
Yeah. So there's too much unpredictability in Badlanders. And then when you bring in the idea of something like there are werewolves around, the Badlanders might want to get rid of them because they're stopping them from their own goals, or they might want to get rid of them for any number of other reasons.
That gives me an idea.
What if
the true power of a Badlander is that they're the hero of the people?
Well, so yeah, but what
are about Badlanders, and their true power is that any person will side with a Badlander, right?
What if this was part of back when the treaty happened, and part of the elimination of the werewolves, the quote unquote elimination? What if part of the agreement was that it was publicly declared that the Badlanders wiped out the werewolves, and that they were the heroes that did it, and the werewolves were this huge threat, and
that's still their number one thing.
So and publicly,
it's not only werewolves, but it's also the shadow vein. Like any vampire who doesn't have their, you know, we have these pass books, basically a medieval, your travel book, your medieval passport.
Right.
You know, like if you're a vampire without that, or they discover, you know, so basically that means you're shadow vein, or you're a werewolf. Yeah, you're illegal. They're allowed to kill you instantly without trial. They are. That's where they are.
They are the law. Yeah.
They're the law, right? They don't need to bring you to a court like that. They have the absolute right to kill you then and there.
And so then they become the heroes of the people, but it also makes them incredibly useful to both the vampires and the werewolves.
Yes.
To get rid of their own internal rivals.
Yeah.
They expanded from that to be also other monster killers as well.
Yeah.
Right? They protect people from monsters. They're you know, from not just amortals, but any kind of danger, they protect the people.
So there's almost an expectation on the Badlanders that if a werewolf shows up, they're going to take care of it. It's like it's their duty, it's their job.
When a Badlander shows up, there should be something they say that's like, I should protect you as if you were a prince or princess who I protect. You know, it's almost like when the Badlanders show up, because they are the guards who protect the
catchphrase.
like when they come to your town, it's like, I should protect you as I protect them.
Yeah.
Like, what a powerful thing, right? Yeah. Like, I can't be here all the time, but while I am here,
you are royal.
As if you were royal. So, yeah, wow.
I mean, we could make it darker and dirtier and say that there were certain werewolves that were sacrificed for this purpose, even. Like,
there may still be.
That there were werewolves who like, they're within werewolf society, these criminals of werewolf society were given to the Badlanders to execute them, to prove that they like had done that. This is what they do, and this was what elevated the Badlanders so quickly, and they became these like renowned heroes.
And they still may be. It still may be that within Beastknight society, if you screw up enough to the point where they're going to execute you, they'll give you to the Badlanders. They declare you wild and set the Badlanders on you. And same with the vampire. You can't afford to have somebody awful in your fire hold, because then that's going to look really bad for you. So you declare them Shadowvane and let the Badlanders kill them.
Oh my God, for werewolf children, it would be like, if you don't behave, we're going to have to give you to the Badlanders. We're going to have to give you to the Badlanders. Like, and the Badlanders are almost like the boogie monster, but they're real.
They become the boogeyman for the monsters, which is really interesting.
Yeah. And they should be.
Yeah.
I mean, there's got to be something to them, right? They're tough.
And it might be that why is it that Badlanders are always able to take on these hugely powerful werewolves? Well, maybe the other werewolves are helping them out. You just don't know it.
A little bit, yeah.
You know?
Can you imagine the like sacrifices that the werewolves have to make sometimes for somebody who makes a big mistake? Like, it could be heart-wrenching.
Yeah, because if there is, if fearmongers can't get there in time, you might have to sacrifice this person and let the Badlanders kill them. It's
like, you'd be like, you can't do anything about it, or without exposing yourself, or without exposing like the rest. Like, they're in a predicament. Yeah, they're really in a situation where they have to like sacrifice their own sometimes and let things happen. Like, it's that's harsh.
Which would make them not hate the Badlanders, but resent them.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Which is probably why they want to keep them busy unveiling other vampires, to try to keep them running after vampires.
The werewolves have this thing where the werewolves hate the Shadowvane.
Yeah.
And they basically have this campaign where they constantly are revealing the Shadowvane to the Badlanders secretly.
Yeah.
The Badlanders don't realize the werewolves doing it.
Yeah.
To get the werewolves to attack Shadowvane and not them.
Yeah.
Right.
Keep
so
them
busy. So as part of their thing, they just always leave seeds, like a trail of acorns to the Shadowvane. Because they're like, we hate the Shadowvane too, but the Badlanders just can't listen.
They're almost like this, in a way, they're
equally evil.
It kind of makes them the secret benefactors in a weird way, because
and then you have vampires doing the same thing.
Yeah.
Because you can get rid of your rivals that way.
But there needs to be a good reason why the Badlanders think the werewolves are so bad. Like during the big war, the Pureborn, there must have been a battle, or at least or a couple of battles, where the werewolves did some despicable things, right?
Yeah.
Well,
and of course, as we all know, the victors write the history, right? So I'm sure the Pureborn did despicable things as well, but of course, like we know the Germans firebombed London, the Battle of Britain, right? Of course, we did far worse to Germany.
Yeah. We did way more damage with bombs to Berlin than we did to Hiroshima. The difference was here seeing
I mean,
one line.
Dresden didn't have a single brick put together by the end, right?
So,
Right.
So here's how I would see it. It's mainly the Pureborn that the Fang Knights allied with, because the Pureborn are the ones in control.
Right.
So the werewolves don't have a beef with the Metalborn. They probably lived in peace. So the Pureborn came in and started fighting with the Athenra and all this, and they were probably witness to that. They were probably trying to help push back, and defend the Metalborn, the Athenra. So it's almost like the werewolves want to see the Athenra come back into rule.
Yeah.
And the vampires are supporting the Pureborn because they're on their side. So you've got this divide. But the Badlanders are also Metalborn, many of them. So you kind of can't. It's like that was a very good strategy of the mortals to put Metalborn into the Badlanders, because now both.
When the Pureborn come in, they see that one of the major weapons of war that the Metalborn have is werewolves, and so you have to get rid of that. And part of that is making sure that they stay gotten rid of. So you demonize them and make them the enemy, and then you start a whole group of people who you take from the people you've conquered, the Metalborn.
Yeah, so maybe that's...
And throw them at these guys and make them evil.
So that's what made them start recruiting Metalborn. Maybe the Pureborn used to just use Pureborn Badlanders. But after this, like, you know, this back and forth with the werewolves, it's like they started taking Metalborn into the Badlanders just as insurance to kind of try to keep the werewolves from taking them all down, or keep them in their place, so to speak. Maybe that was part of the agreement. Even the werewolves said, well, we'll stay undercover, but you need to make sure you bring some Athenra into your ranks, and you need to make sure that you bring in, some Indridi and
they say, sure, that's great, because then they'll be on our side.
Yeah.
And
actually, there had to been an agreement. There would have had to been an agreement where they would have had to brought pureborn blood into the werewolf world, because obviously the werewolves existed before the pureborn came. They weren't pureborn; they were metalborn.
Yeah.
Right. So there had to been some sort of agreement made that they would basically mix with the pureborn ability.
So both sides had to end up.
How did that work? Like, that happened. Like, the common trope of that is the Saxons and the Normans, right? Like, people don't remember this, but at the same time, one of my ancestors, a Norwegian king, Harald Hardraldsson, was invading England at the same time as the Normans. And in fact, the reason why the Saxons lost is they fought off the Norwegians, the Vikings, and then race south and fight off the Normans. And they were so weak from fighting two battles, that's what they lost the Normans. The Normans came in, and they basically, unlike the Norwegians, who the existing nobility, the Saxon nobility, they weren't even Saxon. They were actually Norwegian nobles who came in already and were Norwegian, right? So if the Norwegians had won, they would have just merged with the local nobility. But the Normans came in, and even though they were half Viking, they were also half French. And so they replaced many of them. But there was a subclass of nobility called the Saxon nobility, which you see in the Ivanhoe story, right? It's all about the Saxon and the Norman nobility conflicting. So in this case, you would have the pureborn nobility coming in, taking over. There'd be some metalborn still hanging around. So I guess the werewolf clans would purposely
that's part of the wisest werewolves would see that as a strategy, being like, we can't just trust them to keep their word. We're going to have to be part of them. They're going to have to be part of us, or we're going to have to be part of them. Because the only way to be able to truly be strategically in a high house is to embrace the pureborn into your people. So they had to. They were like, we've got to think about survival.
Didn't do that. They ran off, and they've maintained their pureborn, and they hate they maintain their metalborn status basically, and they hate pureborn. But these ones purposely brought in because they knew their Wereborn thing. It doesn't matter who you met because they're used to marrying people who don't know their curse.
Yeah.
So they started intermarrying on a huge level. But the thing is that it's so if the moat is in your clan, like that, those moats will stay in your clan if you're Wereborn.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, you have
part of that curse is like if it stays in your moon tribe.
It would make sense on both ends because you'd have one group saying, "Let's make some of them pureborn because then they'll be on our side," and then you have the werewolves saying, "Let's let some of the pureborn in here because then we'll be infiltrating them." Yeah. And so both sides are looking at it as when we intermingle, they'll be on our side.
It's like shaking hands. We're going to mix our people, and we're making a peace treaty here. So it's like, so to speak. But I can see that
just like the Ottomans after 5 generations, right?
Can't tell the difference.
They're basically pureborn.
Yeah.
You know? But
so then you have the werewolves.
But they feel they're still Wereborn.
Right.
So for them, it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter.
And so now you have Wereborn, pureborn, and you have the Wereborn everywhere, and you have the vampires who think that they've won.
Yeah. They've done this before. They've done this every time in a Invader race game.
Oh, maybe. Yeah. That's how
when the Ephenra came, they became Ephenra. When the Vrog came, they became Vrog. Yeah. So technically they're motley, but so little it doesn't. You know, they look in a pureborn mostly.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I would think that within a couple of generations, most people, like motley, would be the vast majority of the people in the world on some level.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. They just don't know it.
Yeah, you just wouldn't consider somebody motley because you probably only consider somebody motley if they're like a 50-50 or one.
It's like Americans. It's like Americans saying, "Oh, I'm this and I'm this and I'm this." Well, you're actually you're American.
No, you're
mixed.
American.
You're motley. Yeah. You're actually.
I just saw an interview with a woman who's a historian on this. She's on the Scottish island that's between Ireland and Scotland. I forgot the name of the island offhand, but she's a local historian, and they just did a genetic and linguistic study. And he speaks Gaelic, like all the natives do. They speak Gaelic. She thought she was Gaelic, and she thought the Vikings came and left. And it turns out that she's Viking ancestry, and that all the place names are basically converted from the Norse, right? And so they basically. She said, "It turns out I'm not like a survivor of invasion. I'm an
invader." Yeah,
you know, which is like so like wow. Yeah, yet we picked up Gaelic again just because that's the area we lived in. You know, and so I was stunned to find out that I'm Norwegian ancestry, and almost no Gaelic.
I mean, you take somebody in Lost Lorn and find out that they're 1/64th horned folk.
Yeah.
You're gonna get it's gonna be That doesn't mean you're motley. You're still a pureborn.
And honestly, mechanic and system wise, this makes it a little bit easier to kind of explain if some of your past lives were something else or your moat kind of shifted somewhere. Like, well, because technically it's been mixing. So yes, that makes it a little bit easier to kind of gives us leeway with that.
And makes a really interesting view. It makes any group supremacy be very unusual.
Yeah.
Because, you're going to think I've been on Lorn for however many hundreds of lives. Sometimes I was Basaju. Sometimes I was Athenra. Now I'm pureborn. Mm-hmm. Next time I might be Vrag. You know, I'm not necessarily going to look down on anybody because of that.
Right.
Whereas alternately, you could have somebody who says, my family has been Vrag since the beginning.
Yeah.
My moat has always been Vrag.
The pride, yes.
So I'm going to have that.
How dare you suggest I've been anything other? How dare you?
But your great-great-grandmother actually did marry an Athenra. Yeah.
Which is the case for, the vast majority of people are mixed in our world.
And you find out you have cousins in another birthright.
They just don't realize it because, of course, it's like my great-grandmother swore she was Southern Swedish, right? And the family believed that. And then we found out when my mother went through the church records that her father's name was Giuseppe Gascuvi. And he was an Italian band leader who was traveling through North Dakota back in the day.
Yeah.
A local girl fell in love with him, and they had a daughter, and what was worse than mixed race, and back then it was very much mixed race, right?
Yeah.
Is that he was Catholic and she was Lutheran. And so my great-grandmother hid it her whole life. And then when we found this out, my entire family called me up. And the joke every one of them thought they had invented was, Mark, we know where you come from now. You're the Italian in the family. Because I talk with my hands and I talk a lot.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But until then, and I was 22 when we found out, I thought I was almost 100% Norwegian, just a little bit of Swedish.
Yeah.
And it turns out, no, I'm Italian.
Yeah. I thought half my family was from Germany and half my family was from England, but both sides of my family can trace back to the Ukraine and to Russia.
Okay. Wow.
I
think it's interesting.
Which you can tell looking at me, but you couldn't tell by my last name.
Yeah, last names don't really go much.
Yeah.
When you have the bastard children, and the children of the bastard children trying to rejoin the clan,
or the children who don't have the father they think they do.
Yeah.
Which, if they do the DNA studies of communities, it's surprising how many children are not from the father they think they are. Right? It's shocking.
Yeah.
Absolutely shocking. Just women are very good at hiding it. But it's a good strategy for a woman, right? If you're gonna have lots of kids, have one or two just in case there's a genetic problem. Have one or two with someone else, right? Which is
from a purely biological point of view, sure.
From a purely biological point of view, yeah.
Yeah.
But as we know, these biological needs can manifest socially, right?
Right.
And they often do in weird ways. So which is why judging people is so hard, right? It's so dangerous. I think we're good. That's an hour and a half.
Yeah.
We're a bit over time. So thanks for tuning in, everyone. Probably no one's going to watch this for a while, but someday I have a feeling people are going to watch this. And this is years later. Remember, we're just learning what we're doing now. But I think it was a good conversation. I hope.
Yeah.
And if you are watching, join us tomorrow, where we're going to do more of this.
All right. Bye. We'll see you all later.
Bye,
everybody.